Welcome to the first gathering of the Progressive Democrats of Benicia Women's Caucus.
The fact is that women are still not paid equal to that of their male counterparts. Women still are not present in equal numbers in business or politics, and globally, women still do not have access to education, health, and more women are killed worldwide because of their gender.
Community. And the reason that we don't have a majority of women on the city council is not because they can't get elected, it's because they don't run. So, and they don't apply. And I work really hard to recruit women to our boards and commissions. And so please apply, and please run, and please work on a campaign.
What we wish to inspire is to become more politically active and more engaged in our communities.
And I like to tell this story because I hope it is one that can be the beginning of the journey for many others. And that is, it really began being an advocate for my parents who were immigrants. I am the second oldest of 6 children to immigrant parents from China, and who didn't speak English very well, but had a laundry and dry cleaning business in San Francisco for the better part of 30 years to raise their 6 children. And when you have a family business, and certainly immigrants starting to get a foothold in their communities here, of course the best employees are the children. And I was so, I still say it's the best job I ever had. At that time, growing up, I learned a lot about how to interact with customers. I remember counting back change before we had calculators and all kinds of things to help us do that. But more importantly, I grew up at a time when we really felt supported. My parents felt very supported in the west side of San Francisco. We were among European descendants, Middle Eastern descendants, and it was a time where I learned a lot about what community meant. And that it was a value that really stuck with me in terms of when anyone was in need in our community, we all rallied behind, that family or that household, because it was a stain on the entire community if we didn't do that. And so at the age of 13, I actually was tasked by the 4 Chinese American families in the neighborhood to appear before the local school board town hall meeting. It was my little sister was going to be in the first class of the school busing program. And it wasn't because we opposed the busing program, but logistically, the 4 Chinese American families had businesses to run. They were open 7 days a week, and the local elementary school was within walking distance from the business. None of the families had cars, didn't drive, and we were concerned that if anything happened to the children in case of an emergency, that not only would the families have to shut down the business, but they would be on transportation, public transportation, for well over 2 hours to pick up their children and bring them home. And I still have, without any rose-colored glasses on, this notion that politics is for really achieving good, and that it is about having the diverse array of voices around the table so that we can actually be intentional and purposeful in terms of trying to just really embrace the challenges that we have so much that we're dealing with today, that if we have the diverse array of voices, that the solutions that we're going to come up with are really going to have impact. And I just believe that still to my core today. And so much of what I learned as a young child just carried with me that, and I'm sure each of you in your own lives and your own personal journeys can think about a time in your life when you stood up for someone. And I think that's some of the most noblest things that we can be, is just advocates for each other and just supporters of each other. And it's my orientation to how I serve, continuing today. So, and I was 13. The politics it wasn't really about politics. It was really about how do we continue to be a community and to support one another. And I feel like minding the store for my parents' dry cleaning business and laundry business just has really been a foundational aspect of my life that now I have the great privilege of minding the store for the great state of California as your controller.
Learning the story of South Africa at that time for me gave me the outrage that really fueled my desire for justice. I was raised in a social justice family, but I think that for me gave me the lens to really see against the backdrop of what came in the years after that, the change that is possible when people organize and when they stand up to injustice generation after generation.
How you treat other people matters, and so having something like that happen to me, or to someone to me, so close to my age, was very powerful. And I was moved by the fact that he felt as though no one stood up for him, and he had no one to go to.
once my son was born, like that fire reignited very powerfully, you know. It was like this lioness was just like, I was ready to roar, you know, out there in the world. And that was we took to the streets, and from that point on, I think I kind of just said, well, this is the way you're able to influence and fix a lot of those injustices and those problems that, you know, create these barriers for folks in my community in particular.
It's getting involved on your local level and staying involved, making sure you're actually acting on what's passionate for you, because if you enjoy doing it, you're going to keep doing it, and I think that's the most important.
Harking back a number of months to the confirmation hearings for Judge Kavanaugh, I know some of us would like to forget that particular period of time, but I think it was a real inflection point for people to see just how out of balance our elected leadership is with the people who are living on the ground every day. And you know, it was an interesting moment for us within the women's political circles, comparing it, of course, to 1991 when Anita Hill testified to an all-white male Senate Judiciary Committee. Fast forward around 20 years later, and you have a number of women, a multiracial group of women, who most of whom were elected in the wave year of the woman of 1992, which followed Anita Hill, and the similarities don't end there. So, you know, as a group, we got together and really noted that this is progress. It's important that during that testimony, it was not the same makeup of the committee, but we have so much further to go. And so I think for women in particular, when women are not at the table, when people of color are not at the table, when LGBTQI people are not at the table, it's not just that those perspectives are not represented, it's that we don't have the full spectrum of the needs before us in front of a body.
This disparity of representation of women in government in particular is I think is part of the problem.
And so I just think this whole time that we have right now is such an opportunity to really build that infrastructure for how we're going to get the next 20 women elected and how we're going to get to parity at all levels of government. And we're the 5th largest economy in the world and unfortunately have the highest effective rate of poverty in the United States. Those are the bookends within which I do my work. And the voices of women are critical to this, because it is women who are at the service sector levels of work that are barely making ends meet, who are suffering the most from the affordability crisis in the state. And as Suzanne said, they have to be at the table, because if they're not, the solutions that we're going to come up with aren't going to be impactful to them and aren't going to necessarily move the needle for them. And so this is really what this is all about. It's not just for elevating the numbers of women and getting to 50 plus 1, but it really is about what are we going to deliver with respect to improving society, frankly, protecting our democracy, because it's only as strong as the ability of each of us to fully participate in it.
It was my mother, my grandmother, my aunt, who were sort of my core safety net. That was my team, and then throughout my life and my career in particular, I mean, the mentors that I've had that have had the most positive and significant impact, that have uplifted me, have literally said, here's my spot, you take it so that you can gain this experience and you can start, polishing your chops, has been women. I mean, I wouldn't be here without that kind of support.
I believe that people seem to or tend to discredit women who are sitting at the table, even if they are sitting at the table. Not only do you have to fight for a place to sit, you need to fight to be heard and recognized and respected. And so I believe that it's always important to remove that lens and make sure that you're judging someone on their capacity, their capability, what they've done, what they plan to do, what they say they're going to do, and not just what you believe to be true.
I hear just anecdotally from a lot of women candidates trying to get their campaigns off the ground that they're so frustrated with the speed of donations. A lot of times if a man announces he's granted a certain estimation of viability that a woman with the same background and the same experience might not have, and people are quick to throw in their support financially, whereas a woman has to prove more or show more or dispel more rumors or whatever it is. So I think we're all fairly familiar with those dynamics, but I think the other thing to point out here is this moment that we're in of the resistance, which I know a lot of you play a role in, and it's very multifaceted. Women are really at the core of that. And women always have been in terms of movements, especially women of color. But, I've read statistics when we defeated the ACA rollback last year, it was as many as 85% of the calls going into the White House were made by women.
It is essential that women support women. But what does that support really mean? Obviously, if we have a candidate, it's about perhaps writing a check or volunteering on a campaign. But it's also mentorship, and I have had the opportunity to mentor a number of women running for office, and sometimes the best way to mentor is just to be brutally honest about what it's going to take to win. And some of the training programs that are available for women now really do help candidates, get to some of those core issues about what it means running a campaign. The fact of the matter is, when you're running a campaign, for many women, they can't afford to take the time off or to be away from family to run a full-time campaign. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of women don't run. It is a sacrifice of time, and it requires a lot of support, and when that support isn't there, they pretty much just put that decision aside. I just made a commitment to myself that when I ran, that I was not going to lose myself, that this wasn't a teenage dream of mine. I have all kinds of interests in life, and so I was going to run to win, and it's a great privilege to serve. But I knew that when I won that I had to really do my part in terms of how I was going to bring other women into the fold.
A lot of the folks I work with are hesitant to believe or have faith in the government. And that is, to me, very sad, because there are so many things, and the government is, at this time, so far-reaching, that can be done to assist you in your everyday life, in your community, in your society. But folks are reluctant to reach out or put faith in a system that has failed them before. So to me, it's one of my favorite parts of my job, and one of the reasons why I believe it's still important to stick with it.
So to me, working with Close the Gap right now feels like the ability to be on offense in terms of getting up under a campaign 2 years before it starts, before it hits the news waves, and really assess a community and work with them to find out what's bubbling and what's hot and who's connected and who's really known on the ground for being a leader.
Hands down, the favorite part of my job is really every day recognizing the tremendous potential of this great state of California, not only leading the nation, but the rest of the world. And as your controller, I have a seat on over 70 different boards and commissions, and I have really able staff who do a lot of that work. But where I have spent a good deal of my time during my first 4 years as controller is really through the capacity of my service on both public pension funds, dealing with climate change on a very global level, and working with other investors around the world, about 250 of them, that represent about $32 trillion of assets under management, going after the top 100 polluters in the world. And really to put them to task with respect to how they're going to change their operation, how they're going to recognize climate risk as a business risk, and what they're going to do in terms of their part to keep the warming of our planet well below 2 degrees Celsius, the goal of the Paris Accord.
These are daunting, the stuff that I work with, because it's not just climate, it's, water issues, it's public health. They seem very daunting, but every small win feels huge, because you know that the impacts are tremendous for thousands or millions of people, and that this is saving lives as well, and protecting the welfare and the well-being of the new generation. So that's an enormous reward, and I feel very, very privileged.
So, I would say that at the very fundamental level, obviously issues that are affecting your very own communities locally are things that are easy to get involved in. But the other thing I would say is, each of you, if you don't view yourself as someone who can actually be a voice for your community, I want you to think twice about that. I oftentimes get asked this question, why should people serve? And, are there people who are serving for the right reasons? And I like to think that, particularly in this time that we're in, that if you're not feeling brokenhearted about something, you probably have no business serving. There's a lot of brokenness right now. And as much as I think that all of us who serve in public office are eternal optimists, because, that's what fuels us and what keeps us going, there's a purposefulness to serving now. And I don't have a lot of patience for people who can't articulate what they're moved by, what they're affected by, what they hope to deliver. I have to tell you, the presidential election right now is really giving me a lot of frustration, because nobody's talking about specific solutions. And it's great that they're swinging left, but frankly, if you can't deliver, doesn't mean anything.
Like Lucy McBath in Florida, she was outraged about her son's death due to gun violence, and she decided, I'm going to get in there and do something about it. Assemblywoman Rebecca Bauer-Cahan in the East Bay was outraged by the Muslim ban, and she's an attorney, and she went to SFO, and she offered pro bono guidance and advice to people there. That's what fired her up, and there she is now in the Assembly. I could go on and on and on with examples like that. Those candidates still need support. The candidates need to be held accountable to the pledges that they made and to delivering on the policies and ideals they hold, but they also need support from the communities who really believe in them and need them to be there.
I think one of the biggest things to keep in mind is that you should know your power. Elected officials are literally there to represent you. You vote for them, you put them in office, they are there to represent what you believe in. Find an issue that you're passionate about. Yes, stick with it, absolutely. But don't just focus on the federal level. Make sure you're watching your state and your local, your counties, your municipalities, and making sure that they're actually executing the things that you believe in. They too are your elected representatives, and they are there to serve you. So being involved, knowing your power, knowing how to get in contact with those who make the decisions you're outraged about, I think that's one of the best ways that everybody can be involved.
Oftentimes, I mean, even for the commissions, it's a volunteer thing. You know, it's a lot of work for no pay. But the reward is enormous, and the impact is huge. And I think it is definitely worthwhile giving it your time and giving it your best. You have to pick your battles. You know, I mean, all the problems are really overwhelming, and you want to kind of try to shoot at everything. It's going to be pretty exhausting. So I'd say pick those things that really move you in the belly and will get you through the times when you're just like, I'm sick of it, I'm just going to go back to work and forget about this stuff.
With a group called WAVE, called Women for American Values and Ethics. It's a bipartisan group that literally the way it started, Joanna Weiss, who founded it, took note of every one of her friends who posted on Facebook in the aftermath of the 2016 election with outrage, and then sent a message to them all a couple days later saying, I noticed you're upset, let's get together and figure out what we're going to do. And at this point, they have a super PAC, a regular PAC, a 501c4, a C3 wing that does legal advocacy. It's crazy. And these are, you know, this is an affluent suburban community in mostly southern Orange County. So across that spectrum and many more, that trip motivated me to really believe that we are building something here, and it's diverse and across very wide swaths, and it has some momentum to sustain the wave that we saw last year into something more extended, which I think in many ways is what we're all fighting to get to.
Being involved for the right reasons and sticking with it is my motivation.
These challenges are only going to make you stronger, and they're only going to make you more courageous. And my mentors, all the female mentors that I've had, that's what they're always in my head. They always say this. You know, this is why I think it's so important. So what I'm getting to is it's important for you guys to have those people in your life, and for you guys to be that person for somebody in their lives who you can just say, you know, you got this, girl, you know your stuff, you got this. You have a good heart, and whatever your decision, you have to trust your decisions.
How lucky we are to be here in California, and how every day we get to wake up and we truly embrace diversity as our greatest strength and not a threat. And how really what happens here in California, and I know many of us in this room travel, and how we get a lot of compliments. Although traveling abroad, it's kind of like, what's up with your guy in the White House? But certainly around this nation, there's just a lot of hope about what happens in California, because we are really seen as the leader. And I think that certainly continues to motivate me in terms of doing our best to really make California shine with all of the challenges that we have. And having traveled this state extensively, what I'm motivated by is the fact that, and many of you will remember, there was almost a measure on the ballot to split California into 3 states. And I believe to my core that every issue that we are facing, whether it's poverty, whether it's climate change, the effects of climate change, whether it's looking at how we deal with all kinds of equity issues, we can solve all of that within California. One of the things I hope to accomplish, and this is something that we're prepared to deal with our aging population here in California. And when you look at where we are with the caring professions here in California, it's abysmal, and frankly, not the best value statement to say that those to whom we entrust our loved ones, whether it be our children, our loved ones with special needs, our elders. We don't value that work enough. But more importantly, out of the experience of caring for my mother, we have to be sure that our caregivers get the tools that they need. And there's no reason why we shouldn't be deploying our technological innovations, robotics, all the tools of how we provide for quality of service and certainly the ultimate outcome, quality of life for our loved ones. And so I hope to elevate this conversation to where when we talk about how we're going to deal with our aging population, that it is about really elevating the value of the care that's being provided, pay those caregivers more, and hopefully create an economic ladder for so many who are in those professions, particularly women and people of color.